Conscription in Singapore, called national service, requires all male Singaporean citizens and second-generation permanent residents who have reached the age of 18 to register for national service compulsorily. Depending on physical and medical fitness, they serve a 22 or 24-month period as full-time national servicemen either in the Singapore Armed Forces, Singapore Police Force, or the Singapore Civil Defence Force. Thus, all able-bodied young boys are encouraged to lead a healthy lifestyle to benefit the 2 months off the NS period as a bonus incentive. When a conscript completes his full-time service, he is considered to be operationally ready, and is thereafter known as an operationally ready national serviceman. NSmen are the equivalent of other countries' reservists. NSmen make up greater than 80% of Singapore's military defence. They form the backbone of the SAF as NSmen represent the collective will of the nation to stand up for itself and to ensure the security of the nation. The majority of the conscripts serve in the army, as part of the SAF. The reasons for this include the relative manpower needs of the army compared to the Navy and Air Force, the SPF, and SCDF. Moreover, as compared to the Army, the Air Force and Navy are smaller armed services composed primarily of regular servicemen. As the RSAF and RSN's manpower tend to be more specialized, the constant periodic turnover of NSFs is considered to be very disruptive. Singapore is among the list of countries with a national service exceeding 18 months and thereafter a statutory age cap of reservist obligation up to age 40 for WOSEs and age 50 for commissioned officers. Prior to June 2004, Singapore used to have a mandatory national service period of 30 months. In the 1960s and 1970s, during the infancy years of building up the SAF, full-time NS commissioned officers are obliged to serve a mandatory national service period of 36 months in return for grooming them to take up leadership roles. History: the NS Act was passed on March 14, 1967, as the Singapore government felt that it was necessary to build a substantial military force to defend itself. The country had only about 1,000 soldiers at independence. In the late 1960s, the British government had decided to withdraw its troops and bases east of Suez, including troops stationed in Singapore. That prompted the government to implement a conscription program for the country's defense needs. It adopted a conscription model drawing on elements of the Israeli national conscription schemes. Singapore had sought assistance through official diplomacy to other countries, but their refusal to provide help prompted the initiative of Israeli diplomats to extend a helping hand to the then young and new sovereign nation in the establishment of the Singapore Armed Forces in the infancy years. The stated rationale behind conscription is twofold. Firstly, because Singapore has a population of about 5.5 million, an army solely of regulars would not be practical to defend the country. Secondly, national service is supposed to support racial harmony among the Chinese, Malay and Indian communities. The Malays were virtually excluded from conscription from the beginning of the draft in 1967 until 1977 and, after the policy was eased, were assigned mainly to serve in the police and civil defense, not in military roles. In 1987, Lee Hsien Loong stated that if there is a conflict, if the SAF is called to defend the homeland, we do not want to put any of our soldiers in a difficult position where his emotions for the nation may be in conflict with his religion, and in the roar of the Lion City, military analyst Sean Walsh claimed that official discrimination against the Malay population remains an open secret. The Ministry of Defence contests the charge, noting that there are Malay pilots, commandos and air defence personnel, and stating that the proportion of eligible and qualified Malays selected for specialist and officer training is similar to the proportion for eligible non-Malays. Enlistment: according to the Enlistment Act, conscription is mandatory for all persons subject to the Act, defined as those who are not less than 16.5 years of age and not more than 40 years of age, with some exemptions and with no specific bias to gender. In practice, however, male Singaporean citizens and second-generation permanent residents who registered NRIC at age 15 are required to register for national service upon reaching the age of 16 years and 6 months, during which they would also be required to undergo a mandatory medical examination to determine their medical status, known as physical employment status, which is to determine to which vocational groups the person can be posted to. Male children who take up permanent residency status under the sponsorship of their permanent resident parent are required by law to serve national service, just like Singaporean male citizens, because they too enjoy the socio-economic national benefits of schooling and living in peacetime Singapore. They are also known as second-generation PRs. In general, most male citizens are allowed to defer NS to complete their full-time tertiary studies up to the first pre-university qualification bar, before enlistment for basic military training at the age of 19 for junior college graduates or 20 for polytechnic graduates, and those granted approval in national sports teams to compete in national/overseas events will be drafted as soon as they return from one of the national-level events. Pre-enlistees who ran afoul with the law and sentenced to Changi prison are never released back into Singapore Armed Forces. Complete NS exemptions are extremely rare nowadays, and are usually due to permanent disability or severe medical conditions to be graded PESF by the SAF Medical Board and other exceptional case-by-case basis. Lately, national policies are progressively tightened to close up any loopholes that are exploited by draft evaders. Asthma cases are typically graded PESE, and are not to be deployed on a training or reservist basis. The maximum status that MINF will give to the autism is PESE. There is a voluntary early enlist scheme by CMPB for pre-enlistees who opt for early enlistment, with the consent of their parents, to begin their full-time national service at the earliest age of 16 years and 6 months. The PES status is that it will be given are as follows: PESA, normal conditions, fit for all combat vocations, generally 9-week BMT, PES-B, normal conditions, fit for most combat vocations, generally 9-week BMT, PES-C, normal conditions, fit for combat support vocations, generally 9-week BMT, PES-D, temporary unfit and meant for further investigations only, PESE, medical conditions, fit for administrative duties only, generally 3-week BMT, PES-F, generally unfit for national service. In the past, the duration of the conscription for a typical Singaporean male spanned over a period of either 2 or 2 years and 6 months depending on his educational qualifications. In 2004, the duration was reduced to 2 years, driven by the technological transformation into the third-generation SAF and the surge in NS intake for the next 10 years. As a bonus incentive, the NS duration can be cut by a further 2 months when the combat-fit PESAB1 enlistees are able to obtain a silver or gold for their physical fitness test prior to enlistment. However, non-combat fit enlistees will only be granted release once the behavioral pattern for both BMT and all training is performed well, in order to go to a course that is disrupted by NS. Refusal to serve and conscientious objection. Those who are liable to serve national service as a national duty to the country but refuse are charged under the Enlistment Act. If convicted, they face up to both 3 years imprisonment and a fine of 10,000 Singapore dollars. Draft defaulters' penalties were increased significantly in January 2006 after Melvin Tan, who was born in 1956 in Singapore, received a composition fine for defaulting on his national service obligations in the 1970s after attaining British citizenship. In Parliament, Defence Minister provided some illustration of the punishments defaulters would face, where the default period exceeds 2 years but the defaulter is young enough to serve his full-time and operationally ready NS duties in full. MINF will press for a short jail sentence. Where the defaulter has reached an age when he cannot serve his full-time NS in a combat vocation or fulfill his operationally ready NS obligations in full, a longer jail sentence to reflect the period of NS he has evaded may be appropriate. Where the defaulter has reached an age when he cannot be called up for NS at all, a jail sentence up to the maximum of 3 years may be appropriate. A handful of NS pre-enlistees are court-martialed for their failure to enlist or refusal to be conscripted. Most of them were Jehovah's Witnesses, who were usually sentenced to 3 years imprisonment by default at the SAF detention barrack facility, and are separated from other conscription offenders. As of July 30, 2014, 16 Jehovah's Witnesses are reportedly serving time in the SAF detention barracks for conscientious objection to military service. The government does not consider conscientious objection to be a legal reason for refusal to serve NS. Since 1972, the publications of Jehovah's Witnesses have been outlawed in Singapore. This is commonly misinterpreted to mean that Jehovah's Witnesses themselves are outlawed in Singapore. In the Singapore Parliament on August 5, 2014, the Defence Minister stated that according to records, no such persons have been granted reinstatement of permanent residence or citizenship. He added that the policy has been progressively tightened recently such that no NS-liable permanent resident who renounced his permanent resident status in the last decade has been granted approval for work or study. For former permanent residents who fail to serve NS, any immediate or future applications including the renewal of their parents and inclusive of immediate family members' re-entry permits will be adversely affected, including curtailment of the re-entry permit. Type of services: military service. There are several types of basic military training conducted by the SAF at its BMT Centre on Pulau Tekong, an offshore island off the northeast coast of Singapore, or at selected battalion units which directly draft mono-intake recruits. Combat-fit NSFs with higher education undergo a 9-week enhanced BMT program. NSFs with other educational certificates and mono-intake recruits undergo a similar program, less a situational test, for assessing recruits in the selection posting to command schools, the Specialist Cadet School and Officer Cadet School. Also, a selected handful few are transferred to the police service to get accelerated advanced training as an inspector. Recently, selected NSFs having at least NITEC certificates who perform exceptionally well are recommended to undergo the SIT test model to deem assessment suitability for commander training. NSFs who are medically graded PESC and E either have to go a 9-week modified BMT or a 4-week induction program for recruits to be trained for combat service support vocations. NSFs who are medically fit, but did not pass the pre-enlistment National Physical Fitness Award, will have to undergo an additional 2-month physical training phase, making it a 17-week BMT program for additional physical conditioning. Conscripts who are considered medically obese go through a weight loss 19 weeks BMT. The obesity of a conscript is determined by his body mass index during the pre-enlistment medical checkup. A BMI of above 27 is considered indicative of obesity, as opposed to the World Health Organization's guideline of 30 and above. After ORD, combat-fit NSmen have to take the IPPT annually as a citizen soldier obligations to protect Singapore. Mono-intake refers to conscripts who are directly enlisted into battalion units and undergo their basic military training there, bypassing the Pulau Tekong BMT, for example Naval Diving Unit, Commandos. Police service: though a majority will serve in the SAF for their national service, a number of enlistees will serve their NS years in the Singapore Police Force. Those who have been chosen to serve in the SPF undergo training at the Home Team Academy where they study the Penal Code and Standard Police Protocol. After training at the Academy, they will be posted to various departments of the SPF, such as Special Operations Command, Logistics, Land Divisions, Airport Police. Those posted to the Police Coast Guard or Police Kins will undergo further training. Selection of officer cadets to undergo the NS Police Inspector course is a stringent process for Police National Servicemen. A very small number, usually one who is awarded the Best Trainee Award, from each cohort will be selected, with the majority of the OCTs being the Singapore Armed Forces National Servicemen who have completed their basic military training. Civil Defence Service: the Singapore Civil Defence Force is the emergency rescue force of Singapore and they provide firefighting, rescue and ambulance services, and has been one of the 3 national service postings since 1972. Those enlisted into the SCDF typically undergo 7 weeks of training at the Basic Rescue Training Centre, where they are given basic rescue training, exposed to regimental discipline, and trained to maintain a level of fitness required of all NSFs in Singapore. Much like the SAF's CISPEC course, Selected NSFs are also posted to the Civil Defense Academy to undergo the firefighter course or the Emergency Response Specialist course within the first 2 weeks of their BRT stage, passing out as firefighters for FFC trainees, and as fire and rescue specialists for ERS trainees who would also simultaneously be conferred with the sergeant rank. Firefighters would typically be posted out to the various fire stations island-wide after passing out, while fire and rescue specialists would be posted as section commanders at territorial division, fire stations or at the Special Rescue Battalion. Based largely on rankings at the time of course completion, a small number may also be posted as instructors back in the CDA to staff the Command and Staff Training Center, Specialist Training Center, or Firefighting Training Center. While a certain level of health and fitness prerequisites are expected by both the FFC and ERSC administrators before one can be selected for these courses, admission into the ERS course typically requires a certain set of additional qualifications, namely either a minimum of a GCE Advanced Level Certificate, a diploma or a higher NETC certificate. These added prerequisites are viewed as necessary in the light of a section commander's operational and administrative role when posted out. One marked difference between the FFC and ERSC is the added rescue and emergency training received by ERS specialist cadet trainees, as well as the General Command and Control term, which includes the basic Home Team course held at the Home Team Academy and an outward-bound Brunei trip which serves to equip and develop the necessary leadership skills required of a specialist junior officer. In terms of administration and duration, the FFC is under the charge of the FFTC and lasts 3 months, while the ERSC is under the purview of the CSTC and lasts 6 months. In addition, there is also the Basic Officer course under the charge of the CSTW, designed to train NSFs and regulars as senior officers of the SCDF, with NSFs graduating as lieutenants. While the BOC is traditionally largely made up of NSFs from the SAF who had just completed their basic military training at Pulau Tekong, the top 5 to 10% of the ERSC will also be offered to cross over to the Basic Officer course to be trained and commissioned as senior officers after passing out, spending the last 3 months of the BOC together with officer cadet trainees. NSFs who undergo the full 7-week basic rescue training at the BRTC are subsequently posted and trained to become medical orderlies, dog handlers, provosts, information and communications and logistics specialists or instructors among many other vocations upon passing out from the BRTC. Singapore permanent residents, second-generation permanent residents, are mandated by law to register for enlistment to the compulsory full-time national service and later, reservist duties when they turn operationally ready. Minister for Defence Dr. Ng Eng Hen stated in Parliament that between 2006 to 2011, about 8,800 males who had become permanent residents under the sponsorship of their parents were enlisted for unserved national service. On the other hand, 4,200 males who had become permanent residents under the sponsorship of their parents renounced their PR status prior to serving national service. Their failure to serve NS will be taken into account to have adverse impact when they subsequently apply to study/work/visit/travel in Singapore. These ex-PRs were sternly warned about the dire consequences of their actions at the point of renunciation. After completing mandatory full-time national service, they can qualify to apply for the accelerated Singapore citizenship scheme. However, citizenship is not guaranteed for all applicants, as there are certain criteria that must be met such as educational qualification, income qualification and NS work performance/conduct appraisal in the NS Certificate of Service issued upon ORD. From 2006 to 2010, about 2% of 3,000 second-generation permanent residents who completed full-time national service and applied for Singapore citizenship were rejected. In the Singapore Parliament on August 5, 2014, the Defence Minister stated that according to records, no such persons have been granted reinstatement of PR or citizenship. He added that the policy has been progressively tightened recently such that no NS-liable PR who renounced his PR status in the last decade has been granted approval for work or study. For former PRs who fail to serve NS, Any immediate or future applications for renewal of their parents' and immediate family members' re-entry permits may be adversely affected, including curtailment of the re-entry permit. If the person is not granted Singapore citizenship but still holds Singapore permanent residency, he is still obliged by law to serve the national service obligations, that is operationally ready reservist duties/in-camp trainings. Singapore permanent residents who served national service but did not acquire Singapore citizenship will be treated equally to those permanent residents without service obligation. They would not have access to the privileges granted to Singapore citizens. In popular culture, literature, From Boys to Men, a literary anthology of national service in Singapore edited by Koh Buck Song and Umaj Baisha, 50 works of poetry, prose and play scripts by 30 writers, from 1967 to 2002, the 35th anniversary of national service in Singapore. This anthology contains seminal works about the dilemma of duty, such as The Fragrance of Lalang, a sonnet by Koh Buck Song. Film, Army Days directed by Ong Keng Senator A Boys to Men directed by Jack Neo, Theatre, Army Days by Michael Chiang, Full Tank. Radio Silence, Botak Boys, Charged, documentary, Every Singaporean Son, Every Singaporean Son, Epilogue, Making the Cut, Guards Conversion Course, Every Singaporean Son 2, The Making of an Officer, see also, Awards for Singapore National Serviceman, 1954 National Service Riots, Chinese Opposition to Conscription Service During British Rule, From Boys to Men, a literary anthology of national service in Singapore, edited by Koh Buck Song and Baisha, Umaj Landmark Books, Singapore. ISBN 981-3065-67-2, Shoulder to Shoulder, Our National Service Journal, Ministry of Defence, Singapore ISBN 981-04-6931-4, External links, IPREP-NS, Information on Preparation for National Service in Singapore, Singapore Statutes Chapter 93, Enlistment Act, archived in the Attorney General Chamber of Singapore. Shoulder to Shoulder, Our National Service Journal, a colourful and light-hearted handbook published by Mindfin 2002, in commemoration of 35 years of national service. The NSMEN website, the NSMEN's portal, Enlistment Act, Basic Military Training Graduation, References.